Okay, so for this interview, we're going to be talking about Father Howze.
All right.
So how do you know Father Howze?
All right. When we were in the seminary, Bishop Vincent Waters, he was the one right after Bishop McGinnis. Bishop McGinnis was the third bishop of Bishop McGinnis was the second bishop of Raleigh. And the Raleigh diocese covered the whole state then.
Yeah.
Well, we were in the seminary during the school year, and then in the summer we would have meetings with Bishop Waters, and we had a census somewhere all over the state, including Asheville and Charlotte and Wilmington. And I got to meet, and I met him several times. I didn't know him well, but I got to meet Father Howze, and that is spelled, I want you to spell it right, with a Z in it.
Okay.
He was Bishop Joseph L. as in Larry, Howze, Howze. All right. He was originally from Alabama. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
He was in one of those few black Catholic families in Alabama. Mm-hmm. And this is some of his background, and he used to talk to us a little bit. Father Howze. He wanted to be a bishop in Alabama. But back then in the mid-60s, this was the mid-60s, the bishops gave lip service towards racial equality and that kind of thing. But they thought about their purse strings too much, and the older Catholics, especially in Alabama, the deep South states, yes. Alabama, Mississippi, and this is why he came here. The bishops in Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana even, the Cajuns, they were French mostly, you know. They weren't against racial equality. Back then, it was you studied about the racial revolution, you know, where black people they had segregation back then, and separate schools, and the further south you went, the longer it lasted. And the bishops down there were not favorable toward even having a black priest, even though they gave lip service towards racial equality. Mm-hmm. So he tried to be a priest down there, and they turned him down. He was a very pious, good, holy man. Mm-hmm. But then he came to the Raleigh diocese, and it was somewhere into the 50s. His black family were converts, and Daphne, D.A. This is a good article about, and I want you to copy this, make a photocopy.
Okay.
This was in the November 7th, 2014 issue of the Catholic News and Herald. It's always come out every 2 weeks. You've seen it, haven't you? Every member gets these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets sent to my house. Yeah.
Mine too. Yeah. So his family, this is useful information about Bishop Howze and Father Howze before that. He was, his family converted to Catholicism in 1948. This was back in the older days, 1948. But he was ordained. He found out about Bishop Waters. Bishop Waters was a little different. He didn't pay as much attention to pleasing every traditional Southern Catholic, you know. And so, he was favorable. He was looking for a black Catholic priest. So he was ordained to the priesthood. Now get this date, for the Diocese of Raleigh in the late 50s, May the 7th. And you can make y'all are gonna have a copy, photocopy made, be sure. He was ordained to the priesthood finally on May the 7th of 1959. That was, and I got into the seminary on February 1st of 1960. I was just a young fellow then with a lot of hair. And his first assignment was at a black Catholic church in Charlotte, Our Lady of Consolation Church in Charlotte. And this is a picture of it back there.
It's a nice little church.
It's always been black oriented. There are others too they pictured. And then it said, when the Diocese of Charlotte was carved out of the Diocese of Raleigh, they needed a new diocese because the Catholic population was growing, and especially around Charlotte.
Yeah.
So it was carved out of the Diocese of Raleigh in 1972. And it said, then Father Howze was serving as the pastor of the parish, which is now a basilica. Do you know what a basilica church is?
I do.
It has special architectural significance as well as historical significance. He went from Our Lady of Consolation Church in Charlotte. He was made pastor of, and this was an interracial church in downtown Asheville. Have you ever been to St. Lawrence Basilica Church in Asheville?
I have not.
That's a big church. And here's a picture of it. They're trying to, it's real, has a real striking architectural design as well as historical. It's been around. It was the only church in Asheville for many years. And they made him the pastor.
That's nice.
Yeah, that was a real, he was smart. I mean, give credit where credit's due. So he was pastor of the parish when they made it the Diocese of Charlotte, which, as you know, that governs the western half of North Carolina, and the eastern half is still governed by the Bishop of Raleigh. Yeah. You know some of that background. Have you ever thought of going into the seminary?
I have not.
Yeah, well, think about some more. How about you?
No, I don't. I'm not Catholic, so.
Oh, you are? What church are you affiliated with?
The Episcopalian Church.
Oh, well, they're very similar. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the Church of England.
Yeah.
I love the fellowship with all kinds of churches, you know. I mean, I'm thoroughly Catholic, but I don't get in arguments with them, but I discuss things, you know, like I'm doing now.
Yes, sir.
And they believe, some non-Catholics, as you probably know, have erroneous ideas about us that are not necessarily all, they might be half-truths, and we're all human. I mean, we've had that priestly, you know, there's always some in every crowd. There's some among the Baptists that have been guilty of this child abuse. And priests too. Imagine it's a small minority, but they made the rest of the priests look bad. Good priests, see? So, well, let me finish this. he was pastor of the parish at St. Lawrence in Asheville, and soon after that, they thought enough of him from Rome, the Vatican, to consecrate him the auxiliary or assistant bishop of Natchez and Jackson, Mississippi. That's southern Mississippi. Natchez, Mississippi. And it says, and in 1977, he became, in 1977, from 72 to 77, he was auxiliary bishop of Natchez, Jackson, Mississippi. And 5 years later, in 1977, he became the first bishop of the Diocese of Biloxi. And that is in southern Mississippi, near the coast, the Gulf Coast. So, and he retired in 2001. And I think you probably heard about him, Father Howze passed on a short time ago.
Yeah.
So, Bishop Howze, in southern Mississippi. And I do know that when they first made him the bishop of southern Mississippi, that there were some of the older Catholics that objected to that, the white Catholics, you know. And so he got around that, and then upon his death, he was just loved and revered by
I imagine.
so many, you know. He was just a great man as well as a priest, you know.
How did you first meet Father Howze?
Well, we would have meetings with Bishop Waters in the summer, we seminarians.
Yeah.
And we could be in the first year of the seminary or the last year. There were deacons even that still went on some of these meetings. And we had a census of 1 or 2 parishes each summer. And I can't remember exactly where, Bishop Waters had 2 apostolates in North Carolina. I don't know if you heard of those. An apostolate center is a central location. There was one in the eastern part of the state and one in the western part of the state, where they had they had 2 or 3 priests assigned there at the apostolate center, and they would. It was a good system. Bishop Waters was very good at organizing things. He was one of the old line of bishops. Back then, those type bishops, you didn't argue with them. I mean, now they'll listen to their priests more, but he was nice to you, but when his mind was made up, you didn't argue. You better not argue with him. I knew how he was. He was from Roanoke, Virginia.
Yeah, you don't mess with them.
Yeah. So, but there was a census, and we talked to 1 or 2 priests in that apostolate. I think Bishop or Father Howze was at one of those apostolates. That apostolate was in Wilkes County, where Wilkesboro and North Wilkesboro is.
Yeah.
And that was an apostolate for quite a few years, and they catered to the mountain people who were less Catholic than us. And and there were some black Catholics and black people that they ministered to them too, in different, even rural or country areas. The other apostolate was at Newton Grove, and that's down below Raleigh. And Newton Grove, they had a different set of problems. It was way back in the 1870s. The Monk family, M-O-N-K, the Monk family. They were the leaders around Newton Grove near Goldsboro. It's near Goldsboro. The little country tobacco is mostly tobacco farmers. He was a druggist in Newton Grove, and it's interesting how he became Catholic and influenced about the whole community on becoming Catholics, just regular tobacco farmers. Very unusual. He was a druggist, and in his newspaper wrappings, he would receive his shipments of his drugs about once or twice a month from New York City. And balled up in one of those newspapers from New York newspapers, was an article about the Catholic Church. And he got real interested in it. He would unravel those newspapers and read them. And he wanted to know more about it, so he got the auxiliary bishop from Wilmington to come up there. I'm trying to think of the auxiliary bishop's name. This was the idea behind having that apostolate in Newton Grove. He later became a cardinal after he left here. I'm trying to think of his last name. He was promoted to be the Bishop of Richmond, Virginia, and then the Archbishop of Baltimore. And he was the first cardinal in the U.S. The Vatican made him a cardinal. Gibbons, Cardinal Gibbons, and y'all have had games against Cardinal Gibbons
Yes, we have.
in Raleigh. Isn't there a lot of competition between you? Have you been to Raleigh to some of those games, and they've been here, right?
Yeah, vice versa, yeah.
You what?
Yeah, we've played each other a couple times in different sports.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your win recently. You know, what
Thank you.
what is it,
The basketball.
How many A's?
1A.
1A, but still, that's an honor.
It is.
Were y'all in athletics some?
No, I wasn't. I've had a couple injuries, so.
Yeah, but you know some that are. Are you a senior?
Yes, sir.
And you're
I'm a senior.
and what is your,
I'm a senior too.
also, but anyway, that's some of the background. And Bishop Waters came along, and those tobacco farmers, see, they had a black Catholic church right next after John Carr Monk, the druggist in Newton Grove, became Catholic. The other community head people, they got interested, and he got them interested. The whole community, just about, he got interested. A priest would come up from Wilmington, and he came there, and Bishop Gibbons, if it wasn't Bishop Gibbons, he would get one of his priests from Wilmington. Wilmington had more Catholics, being a coastal city. And, but they sent priests up there on a stagecoach and instructed all those people, tobacco farmers, and they all became Catholics. And the first name of it was St. Mark's. St. Mark's Catholic Church. Now it is named after, a lot of Hispanics moved up there in that area, just like here, and it's now called Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Newton Grove. But anyway, Bishop Waters, those tobacco farmers didn't like that a bit. He said, we're going to close the Black Catholic Church, and they're going to go to Mass at the main church for the white people. Well, those tobacco farmers didn't like that a bit. And so that's the reason Bishop Waters made an apostolate there. There were more problems than usual. That's the reason for that apostolate. And many of those tobacco farmers left the church and got into other churches that were more segregated. But a lot of them came back in the church later, mainly because of that apostolate that Bishop Waters started. So that's the background about apostolates, but let's see now. I want y'all to, read this later, and it's a good article about the background of the retired bishop, Bishop Howze. He was still living when this article came about.
So what was so special about Father Howze with, like, what he did with his work within the church? What was so special about it?
All right, well, I'm glad you're asking questions like that, how he was, his personality. I remember him as quite likable. He wasn't real bubbly, but he was quite likable. And he loved to talk to us seminarians. And during his time as a priest in the Raleigh diocese, he got other priests, other black families interested in becoming seminarians. And by the way, the most recent he was a black priest too at St. Lawrence, Father Wilbur Thomas, and he grew up in Lexington. Have you ever heard of, he's still living, he's retired now, Father Wilbur Thomas. And they made him a Monsignor at St. Lawrence. They made him the pastor of St. Lawrence in Asheville for quite a few years, and he retired from there about 2 years ago. He's retired in somewhere here in North Carolina, Father Wilbur Thomas. I met him too.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to his personality. Father Howze was very personable, and he did cater to the black families and helped in making quite a few converts. He was at that church in Charlotte, Our Lady of Consolation. And this shows you some other background about some early Catholic churches, black Catholic churches in North Carolina. There was St. Mary's. That's the old, smaller church, St. Mary's in Greensboro, on Garl Street.
Yeah.
St. Benedict the Moor. That's St. Benedict the Moor Church. That was mostly black then. Winston-Salem. Let's see, which one of you live in Winston? You're in Winston, and you're?
I'm in High Point.
High Point. You're in Winston. Okay. But you've heard of and that's still going, St. Benedict the Moor Church, right?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
to be honest
well,
with
that's
you.
in Winston. Uh-huh.
Okay.
It's still more black oriented. The Ford Church here, that was close to Belmont. St. Helen's Church, and I was by there for the first time a few days ago. Way out in the country, out from Gastonia, St. Helen's Mission Church of Spencer Mountain, North Carolina. You know, like near us, we have Pilot Mountain, those lower mountains. You look west of Charlotte, and the first mountain you see is Spencer Mountain, from the big buildings of Charlotte. And that's a black Catholic church, St. Helen's of Spencer Mountain, North Carolina. Originally, when the Benedictines first came here from St. Vincent's Arch Abbey in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, you ever heard of St. Vincent's? The Arch Abbot of St. Vincent's Arch Abbey near Pittsburgh in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, sent 3 priests down here and 2 brothers, and they settled one of the later Catholic priests at the very first existing. It's now the oldest existing church, Catholic church in North Carolina, St. Joseph's, north of Belmont at Mount Holly. And it's not been used as a church since the 1870s, but they have 3 masses a year. The main one is on St. Patrick's Day, and then 2 days later, they just have St. Joseph's feast day that St. Joseph's was named after. It's an old white frame building near Mount Holly, close to Belmont in Gaston County, near Gastonia.
All right, so I have one more question.
But in a nutshell, his personality was
Oh, that's
very
great. That's awesome.
personable.
All right, so my last question is, how did Father Howze impact high school students, like within the Catholic Church?
I'm not real sure. I didn't know that much about him. That might be something that you could look into from other sources.
How do you portray his impact on the Catholic Church within?
His general,
Yeah.
I would say very favorable. What?
If you had one thing that you think he should be remembered for, what would be that one thing?
He was a very even-tempered. He wasn't an argumentative type fellow. Now, you might have come across some priests that, everybody has their own personality, and some of them being from up north. Now, this was a southern fellow.
Yeah.
He was more southern than. He was southern oriented. He appealed to us southerners. He understood us better. I can tell you a little bit, because you get these Yankee, I don't call them Yankees anymore, but Yankee priests, and they have different personalities. And we don't always get along with, and we kind of put them through the mill. They kind of mellow a little bit after they come down here.
Yeah.
Especially if they go to a real southern-oriented area. There are a lot of people from other places around here, as you well know. High Point and Winston and Greensboro. They come from all over the country. But you got rural areas. And what else did you need to ask?
That's it for me.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, thank you.